question at the beginning, so maybe people will think about it as we're doing other things, but in the end, we kind of want to know what makes for a good story. And yesterday we were talking about having to choose among competing stories because they're out there in the culture. And how do you know which one to go with? You probably don't, but there's certain things that might make it a good story for you. And a couple of the references on here we haven't read in this class, but I tried to pull out from things we have read. And I want to say something about Jerome Bruner because I have referenced him several times in here, but I didn't give him as one of the readings. Bruner is actually a cognitive psychologist, and cognitive psychologists don't usually do stuff about narrative, but he did, and he wrote a couple books that are now the titles are gonna slip my mind, but they are referenced several times in the readings that you've already had. Because people from all different fields kind of come back to Bruner. He was really the one to give big emphasis to the notion of plot, and that plot has to be there. It's foundational to narrative, and it's from there that everything else flows. And he also brings up this notion of engagement, which in a way it's not synonymous with, but it overlaps with Green et al. And their notion of transportation. But he says, and other people say too, that stories have to be engaging to be good stories, because if they don't engage us, what's really the point? Good old Walter Fisher with coherence and credibility, and we've talked about that several times, but if you looked at the reading by Carolyn Ellis last night, she comes back to those same two kinds of qualities in terms of what makes for a good story. Gubrium and Holstein are also psychologists who have written several books actually about narrative, and when I teach this as a longer class, we use some of their work, but they get into some of the finer points, so that they talk about that a story needs to be richly detailed, but at the same time, we can't get lost in that detail. It's got to make a point.
Can I tell you a 30-second story about Gubrium?
Oh, yeah.
So I know his daughter really well, and I've met his wife, and one day Ellen was talking about how her father he was in a parking lot, and you know how like cars park over the line? Well, so he had to park his car, and he had to park his car over the line as well, right? Just to fit in. And then he went off to class, and when he came back from class, he saw a ticket on his windshield, and he was so angry because he got a ticket for parking incorrectly. And so he then wrote this long, huge formal letter to the police about how they had to take into account the historical conditions under which this happened. And so, I mean, he's...
Did the ticket get excused?
I don't remember her saying that it did. I mean, I don't think it did. I don't think that was the point of it. It was just the fact that he, would take into account tell other people to take into account the historical conditions.
Sometimes I feel like doing
Yeah,
that, but
right.
I don't know.
But he actually does it. I think that's the point, right? He's the kind of guy he is.
They also talk about taking into account audience, who you're telling or narrating a story to, and of course, within communication and particularly rhetorical studies, that would be fundamental. I mean, a story can be expressive just to express it, and you want to put it out there, but if you're really trying to get people to listen to your story, you have to take into account who those people are and the circumstances in which they'll be getting that story. Of course, we can't always control that. If you're putting it out there on the internet, forget that part. But just remember that you have an audience and it can come back to haunt you, depending on what your story says. Okay, Rita Sharon, this idea of fulfilling a desire, which again, you know, may be overlapping with engagement, but I think it brings another dimension to it to talk about something satisfying a desire. And then Lynn Harder saying stories are heuristic. They lead to other things. You know, the notion of intertextuality, that they interact with other stories that are out there somewhere. But I don't know that that's a complete list. So I wanted to kind of throw it back to you all. Are there other qualities that you think, having thought about this for a couple weeks, make for a good story? That would make you choose one story over another, for example?
I guess this might fall under engagement, but maybe some kind of like sincerity or authenticity of the story being told. So it may fit somewhere else, but like if I perceive someone telling a story that doesn't, like I don't really think it's necessarily true for them, or it doesn't feel authentic, I feel like I'm less likely to connect with it.
So I think that does kind of fit with Fisher's notion of credibility, because he says, or he also uses the word fidelity. Does it ring true with experience?
Yeah.
And remember, we've had a discussion that even if we know it's fiction, that, Pauline, we had that conversation, even if it's fiction, fiction can still ring true with experience. Other things you might add on to that?
Well, maybe tied to the idea of engagement, but I guess a good story should be transformative. Should change something fundamentally about you, whether you want to admit it or not.
And that, I think, would fit more with Frank. I mean, I don't know that Frank would say every story is transformative, but really good stories, they kind of remain, they at least remain with us. They stay within memory. We return to them, they make us think. And in that sense, they may be transformative. I think there's degrees of transformation, you know? But I think if a story, it made such an impact that we come back to it, that makes for a good story. And if we were getting into Arthur Frank, and I really didn't put anything from Frank on that list, and I think it goes along with that, Daniel. Again, he is caught up in this notion of, well, he really cares about morality. Now, not every story, he's dealing with illness stories. Not every story, not every good story, I think, it has to do with morality, but I do think it has that there needs to be a takeaway message. There needs to be some life lessons with that. And then he would add the notion of, from the reader or the listener or audience, whoever receives the story, the notion of witnessing, that we have witnessed something of substance or something of moral value. So those take-home lessons work both ways, both from the narrator and from the people receiving that narration. Anything else? That's a pretty good list.
It's hard to think of anything that, because a lot of those are really broad. You know,
Yeah.
fulfills desires. Whatever you want, that's what a good story gives you. Okay, you know, that pretty much covers the gamut almost, you know?
I come back to what we sometimes think of when we were discussing theory building in Jeff's class. Something about it has to be, it has to be abstract enough to apply to everyone, but at the same time, it has to have a certain level of detail so that actually makes sense or actually have some context to it. So I think the good story has to kind of, toe the line between being so detailed and so specific that no one can basically identify with it, but at the same time be abstract enough
That there's a
That's a
carrot,
good
that we can carry it away
Yeah.
and use it.
Has to feel like it's speaking to you while it's speaking to everyone.
Yeah,
but,
I
that's
think
very
that's probably what Gubrium and Holstein were trying to get to with their, with having rich detail, but still making a point that we can get and take with us. Sharon's desire thing, you're right, it's broad, and yet, to me, that connotes something other than, it like stirs something inside you, you know? Desire is like a strong word to me.
Yeah, that's tough because I always say at night, I feel a little bit guilty because I'm reading really trash novels at night because I can't process, all the literature that I gotta read all day long. At night I just want candy, I just want candy for my brain.
That's a desire also.
Right, and exactly, to call that desire, kind of like diversion, is that a desire? I'm sure you guys do as well. Right, trashy TV.
Well, I think that's a pretty good list, at least to start us out with, but just as a way of summarizing some of what we've covered. The I'm gonna segue now into the autoethnographic assignment that I gave for today. In addition to kind of consuming stories, which is what we've done on many of the other days that we've been in here, writing or producing or presenting narrative material is, I think, just as important. And I've purposely chosen several pieces for you to see where writers were dealing with theory or some abstract kind of ideas, but they use stories to pull people in. Myself included, that I often do that, but to me it's like, well, if I'm going to be a narrative scholar, why wouldn't I use stories? If I just talk about narrative totally in the abstract, there seems to be something wrong with that, I think. And it's a different kind of writing than we often do in other sectors of academia. And so that's why I chose Carolyn Ellis's piece, because I don't know how many people got to read that, and if you'd like to talk about it a little, but she's really making the point there that for her, there was something very dry and unsatisfactory about the kind of writing she was trained to do as an academic. And she talks of it, and she originally came from sociology, and she talks about a point in sociology where, oh wow, there's people other than me that are interested in emotions. So they developed this thing, sociology of emotions, but then when she got into it, they're like doing measurement of, you know, let's put it on a scale and measure it. And she's like, no, we're talking about emotion. That is not satisfying a desire. So she, in conjunction with some other people, but she's really a pioneer in this, developed this notion of autoethnography, which is, you know, combining ethnographic impulses with autobiographical material, and really exploring self, but also and so there's the detail, but if it's only about yourself, I mean, it's an autobiography, and it may not be so interesting, because then you're doing navel gazing, right? It might be interesting, but a lot of times it's not. Like, it's interesting to you, but it may not have import to other people. So that's the thing with autoethnography, is that you, through exploration of self, we're hopefully coming to some bigger realizations. And I think in that piece, she's also saying, hey, life is emotional, including your scholarly life, and things that you study, and rather than kind of pretending that those emotions aren't there, we have to find a way to incorporate them and to write about them. And she did that at a time when that really wasn't being done, and to this day I think her work is pretty distinctive in that way. But as a health communications scholar, I think just the nature of the study, I don't know if this is as true if you're doing like organizational studies or in some other venue. And I'll tell a little story to make the point. I had my friend Lynn Harder. Did I tell this story before about her film? She has a film that she made about children with cancer, and we read a piece that came from that data. Actually, we read two pieces that came from that used that data. But part of her work she does as filmmaking. That's her way of telling the story. So she had done a lot of her work in Houston at MD Anderson Cancer Center, and that's about 90 miles away from Texas A&M, where I was teaching. So I invited her to come to Texas A&M to show her film. I think I might have told this story before, so I apologize if I'm being repetitive. But anyhow, we made a flyer, you know, and we're hoping to get a lot of people to come. And people did in the department, were kind of expected to come, and they did. But in the flyer, we told them what the film was about and what she was doing. But then people may not have read the flyer, or they had different expectations, but they came, and it tugged at your heartstrings. And some people found themselves weeping a little, and some of the graduate students, it was particularly our rhetoric graduate students, got really angry. They complained to the department head that they were caught off guard with something that that brought their emotion to the surface. And my response to that was, yeah, good. That's good that it made you feel something. And welcome to the study of health comm, because in studying about health, we run into things that pull at your heartstrings all the time. So welcome to my world a little bit. So for me, that's kind of part and parcel of what I do, and it's not everybody's cup of tea, but anyhow. Anybody want to raise any issues with Carolyn Ellis? I mean, she uses a totally different kind of style in writing that piece. She has a Greek chorus, only it's the sociology chorus.
I want to try this kind of writing and hope somebody publishes it. That's the thing. That's my hope. I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool, you know? I mean, I could...
She gets her stuff published.
I know, that's she does, but I mean, I wonder if... Because you feel like, maybe I could do that.
But you're right. I mean, you're raising, I mean, she's really kind of, not off the charts, but she on it, if we had a continuum of, you know, really kind of straight dry writing and then experiment, I mean, it's really a kind of a form of experimental writing. So there is a press, that I haven't published with this press, but a lot of her stuff comes out. I mean, she publishes in the regular journals, but it's called Left Coast Press, and they're kind of open more to there's places where more experimental writing. I mean, she has some more regular pieces, but they're usually autoethnographic, and there's another piece that's kind of a famous thing that she did that's more, I don't think I talked about this the day we talked about performance, but she talks about doing a performance with her partner in life, who is Art Bachner, but he's also a communications scholar. So they're together as a couple, but they also do a lot of writing together. So I use this piece in my qualitative methods class a lot, just because people are really kind of on the edge about, does this belong in academia or not? So they wrote a piece that's really a performance piece, and she talks about performing it of something that happened in their real life, which is she got pregnant, and it was at a time that they weren't expecting a pregnancy, and they really agonized over whether she should have an abortion or not, which she ended up doing. So that's what the performance piece is about. And she mentions it in there, and I have my classes read the actual piece, and I mean, I'm kind of, I mean, it makes a great piece for a classroom discussion. I'm not sure what I think about this, because it's kind of like too much information. I don't want to know about that part of your personal life, but it serves a purpose.
With this kind of stuff, you know, for me, it's like, how do we as communication people, communication scholars, do this better than linguistic people? You know, I mean, what do we add that the English lit people or whatever don't do better than we do?
Well, we happen to have a literature person with us.
They do it really well. I mean, why should we be doing what they do? You know? Or what can we add to it, or what can, right? I mean, not to say that one's better than the other, but we do what we do, and they do what they do.
So I think, but it's a matter of what is it that we do, and can that be broader than what a lot of people do? And she's arguing, she actually she was trained as a sociologist, but she's worked in a communication department. She's at the University of South Florida, where practically the whole department is qualitative. They have very consciously developed this very qualitative department. But she's saying, you know, whatever discipline you're writing from, you're bringing yourself and that's your emotions, your body, probably your issues. I don't know that you always have to bring your personal issues into it, but if you don't bring yourself into your writing, then you're blocking a really, you're not really being totally honest. So that's, she has an extreme point, and that's why I include her work in here, because I think you have to think about what she's arguing and then make your own decisions about that.
There's one part in the reading where I think it wasn't. I felt like she could have gone a bit more into, but I think she just glossed over it. But it was about the performance piece as well. She talked about performing at a conference, and then people were reacting either way. They're either really emotional, or people like, oh, how is this in any way, helping people, people who are not academics, give them voice, how is this giving them voice?
Right, that it was elitist.
It's so exclusionary, there's no way they're going to be able to write with this level of sophistication and I know she was responding something about, oh, it's innate that we all tell stories, but clearly, to me, there were two different ideas of what storytelling is, and I don't think she kind of delved into that. So I was wondering what you made of the two different conceptions of.
I probably would have put it a little differently, but I share some sympathy with the people that are critical about that. Like I said, for me, that abortion piece is like, I kind of don't want to know about that aspect of their relationship. I don't think that an academic conference is necessarily the right, it's interesting as a performance piece, and it raises questions about decision-making around abortion. I don't know that that was the right place for it, but there was, I've had a couple experiences with Carolyn, and the first time I ever went to like a communication conference, I can remember this really clearly because it was in Miami, and I didn't know what this autoethnographic stuff was, and I came into a session that she and Art Bachner had organized, and they had a bunch of their students from South Florida presenting things, and the whole program was of such a personal nature. And I remember one of the presentations, I think Carolyn talked about the death of her brother who died in a plane crash, and one of her students talked about childhood incest that she had experienced. And I had never heard stuff like this at an academic conference before, and I didn't know what to make of it, honestly. It just
You were
kind
prepared unemotionally for the
I was prepared
like your rhetoric
unemotionally.
students.
Exactly. But nobody gave me a flyer to let me know what was going on, what I could expect to hear. But I was curious about it, and so that was my first experience. Several years later, somebody had organized, actually I think it was my friend Patricia at San Diego State, who had organized a panel with her students doing autoethnography. Not all of it was as gut-wrenching or quite as personal as that. And Carolyn and I were the respondents to that program. But, and there were one or two papers on that program that were of a very private, personal nature made public. And what really kind of bothered me, and I'm trying to get to your question, Daniel, was what it brought forth from the audience, from the listeners. So after the panel was over, there was, a period of questions and responses from people who had come to listen. And there was one poor man, I felt so badly for him, who got up and spoke afterward and made his own kind of self-disclosure. So the stories had that impact on him, that it made him want to self-disclose. And what he told us was that he didn't know if he ought to be at this conference or not because his daughter had committed suicide like a week before. And he really didn't know if he ought to be here. And so he tells this story. And then you know how it goes at a conference, like the session is over and you gotta get out of the room because the next panel's coming in. That's what happened.
Oh, wow.
And
Thanks for sharing.
exactly. And I think I did go talk with him for a while, but I mean, he needed a whole nother set of responses other than that. And it made me think about having that kind of disclosure at an academic meeting. Like there's a place for that and it has a purpose and it's a good thing. It wasn't so much about elitism, it was about appropriateness and the kind of responses it drew from other people and having a place, a space in which those things could get more attention and worked out. And that just made me think, like, I don't want to evoke this in other people. And in fact, I meant to bring that up, that's Carolyn's word from this article, is evocative.
Right.
And we might add that to this list, evocative. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
But it's got to be in an appropriate space for me. So that's where it like gets on the edge for me, and I don't necessarily feel great about it, but not in this piece that she wrote. This piece I included because I wanted you to see a really different style of writing.
Yeah, I mean, not all research has to solve a problem. Some of it has to point to problems in a different way, right? I mean, to be evocative. Some have to. The point of some research is to make us think of new problems, think of problems in a way.
That's the heuristic part. And then Pennebaker, and I think that's pretty straightforward, but here is another psychologist who is doing some measurement and was invited to write this piece for Literature in Medicine, which doesn't usually publish pieces like his, but he has good news to report, which is there's really some great health outcomes that come from people. You don't buy it?
No, I'm saying that's going straight into my next proposal, you know, for the benefits of narrative.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, so you had asked the question, what good is this
Right.
approach? And
Sure.
this is one answer that's a pretty good answer. So with that, what I'd like to do, we'll shut down this slide, and I would like to segue into a lot of ethnographic narratives that people created for today, and we'll give some time for response. If there is any time left at the end, I'm open for any questions about narrative that you want to raise as a result of this workshop or anything else.
Probably should be asking if any of your stories are of a really personal nature. Do you want it recorded down? Because we currently have recording going on.
Yeah. We can always switch it off.
We can switch
If
it
it's
off.
uncomfortable for everyone.
Everyone's okay, or do you want it switched off?
Well, you can think about it when it comes your time. You can say if you want it turned off. Who would like to go first?
I need to get some water. Would anyone else like water? All right, didn't want it when you went. I know, and then once you got it, I was like, yeah,
You go first?
I'm making good arguments.
I'm not sure about that.
That's okay, that's okay.
So I don't usually do this, like, volunteer.
That's okay. Why don't you give a little introduction since you haven't been at the workshop before?
Yeah, I thought I can make it to this workshop because because of the presentation. So, that's the
Okay.
background, right?
Tell them your name
And
and,
I'm Rose Liang from Sociology Department. So I'm teaching course in family, sociology family. So I found this having resonance with what I'm doing with the students because they are telling about themselves.
I'm really appreciative that you came today and that you came prepared with the story, so.
It's not really that, because I was thinking of what you were just saying, how when you tell the story that there are boundaries that you need to decide what you can disclose. So I did pick a very not too
Yeah.
disclosing.
No, and that's why I wrote on the
Yeah,
instructions,
that's-
you're in control of what you want to disclose today.
Right, and so should I go into this? And let's see. Well, actually, it was asking for a turning point, and I just feel it was more of a gradual development. But was it, you really wanted a turning point that you felt?
Well,
was-
what we've been saying about narrative in here is that usually plots come about because they may be big, they may be small, but there's some kind of rupture in your everyday life that creates some kind of tension from which a plot develops. So that's what I meant about a turning point, that something unusual. We're not inspired to tell stories about the same old kind of thing.
I was washing the dishes this morning.
Yeah.
What?
I'm sorry, did I cross boundaries?
You were washing dishes.
Actually, I wasn't, because I live in a service department.
Yeah,
That's another story.
Late night. When you finish your
Sure, it'll be great.
Anyhow, whatever you wrote,
Whatever I
Rose,
present, because I
is
tell my
fine.
students,
Yeah.
wherever you're at, okay, so.
We won't critique.
Okay, so,
Will we? No.
okay, yeah, but I appreciate critiquing.
Okay.
Okay, feedback. Anyways, like, the turning point, if I were to call it a turning point, is that I experienced, it's the experience I felt after I had a general medical exam, and they told me that my blood pressure was normal. And I've been dealing with this blood pressure thing for a long time. And it made me feel great that, yes, I can have control over my own health. And it actually validated and vindicated my suspicion of modern medicine and how they like to medicate. I mean, I'm just making a big fat generalization. But this is kind of been my attitude towards modern medicine. So I try not to do anything. I try to avoid that as much as possible, but I'm more realistic. And so I lost my thing. Okay.
It's okay, take your
Okay,
time.
and so I really attribute this change to a cumulative effect of 3 years of doing yoga. Yoga is, and it was not like I was so disciplined. I went and followed a program. It was in fits and starts and going back and forth. And also at some point getting the support of my daughter to continue it. And so after all this, I find that, yeah, basically what they teach you is about breathing and aligning your body and all that stuff. So that really helps the breathing. I think we don't, about the breathing is important. So, so just to give a very brief history is, like, I have been aware of this blood pressure thing in my family because my grandpa died of a heart attack, and then I also, when I was pregnant, I had high blood pressure, so they put me in the hospital for 1 month because they're afraid the child could be stillborn. So I had this thing always on my mind, and so through the years I never really did much about it, and it just hit me sometimes, yeah, my blood pressure is high, because when I went to public and they gave blood pressure test, I would register 160 over 100. But then I just kind of put it aside. That's previously. But then I started to become very obsessive about it. I used to measure my blood pressure a lot, and it would still be high. And I would see doctors, and then I kept saying to them, yes, I'm going to change my lifestyle, and I'm going to do this, so they're convinced. So they keep saying, okay, eventually you can go on yes, okay. But anyways, that's what happened, the history. And finally, I found with yoga, so if there is a thing that goes beyond my personal experience, is that I guess I didn't confront the issue. It could have been dealt with earlier in life, not like so much later. And even with the help of my daughter as well. That kind of thing.
Thank you. Does your daughter do yoga with you?
Yeah, when she comes, she does, and she actually was so interested. She took the training for just for her own purpose. Like she's got another profession, but she actually has it.
My wife does yoga. She
Right.
loves it. She swears by it.
Yeah.
But I won't do it, and
Yeah.
I always make her mad because I say, oh, I don't want to do yoga because I'm not flexible enough, and she just gets really mad at me.
Well, I feel the same because I try to get my husband to do yoga.
Yes, I know.
I mean, back in, let's see, in Canada, this was like in the 1990s, I registered, like the yoga classes open, right? So I talked to my husband at that time, and then his father, and they seemed to both agree, so I registered them.
Mhm.
But it was a no-show. They didn't show up. It turned out to be an all-women's class.
Yes, there's a story there.
Yeah. You did go?
No,
But
that's
you
what I'm
didn't
saying.
go?
Men and yoga.
Were you registered and then didn't go? Or
You didn't even get that far.
I didn't get as far as your husband. No.
Okay.
Did you disclose to your doctor that you felt like your yoga practice had made the difference in your blood
I
pressure?
actually did, and they were happy about that, like, because I told them my story. And so now I would tell my doctor, even like, let's say, they found that, okay, this is a personal, but it's like I had a bit of fatty liver. So then I kept saying, okay, I'm going to deal with the lifestyle change, like that, because there's a whole thing about this fatty liver. It's nothing to do with, it's really taking too much sugar, right, and carbohydrates, and that turns into fat and stays in the liver. They thought I was drinking a lot because of classes.
Really?
And then just because I said, okay, for a period I took 1 glass of wine a day because I thought it would lower blood pressure. But so then when they took that piece of diagnosis and said, oh, that could be why you have fatty liver, a bit of fatty liver. So, but the doctor, then I talked to him, he said, and I told him about the films that my son actually sent to me, both my children, like, so my son sends me stuff about fatty liver, about things like cholesterol and all that. So, and he has this amazing video that tells about the whole cholesterol story. I don't know if you, and of course, my husband's a bit skeptical, but I think we're beginning to believe him because there are a lot of people watching the carb and sugar, right? So I guess maybe we share our stories about health. It's within our family, but when I see friends, I would tell them, I think, if it's appropriate.
Yeah. So I think I think you're raising another point that could go on that list of qualities, which is not only evocative but inspirational. That the stories can be transformative for ourselves, but that they could help other people to transform. So thank you for that.
Thank you for listening.
I see Sarah has one.
You see, Sarah.
before, I am interested. I'm working on a heart health project here and was wondering if I could, after class, if you could send me the video you were talking about.
Oh, okay, because
I would
I still
love to
have it
see.
in my Gmail.
Okay.
Send to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I will go. I just wrote a story, so I'm just gonna read it straight, if that's okay. All right. It's a little intimidating because I feel like we've just talked about all these great qualities, and now I'm like, I don't know. Like cooking a grilled cheese for Wolfgang Puck, but all right. So, this story will start when I was 13 years old and had this weird obsession with manatees, a phase, I guess. We went to Florida occasionally for vacation, and while we were there one summer, I begged my parents to take me to this manatee sanctuary called Homosassa Springs. We went, and my 2 older brothers came along, a bit spitefully, but they did not leave disappointed that day. On that traumatic afternoon that I will in fact never live down for the rest of my life, I was bitten by a squirrel. And not just a nip, I'm talking a full-fledged clamp down, like a damaged nerve in my finger clamp down.
Wow.
My brother had to hit it against a tree to get it to let go of my finger, hence why they were so pleased with the actions that day. The bleeding was a little ridiculous, and the park ranger even searched the whole forest area for the squirrel to confirm that he did not have rabies. Of course, he didn't find it, and we went to our family doctor's office right when we got home. I had to see the PA since my doctor was out of town, and after telling me that I might have rabies and I might have to get 3 shots a day for 2 weeks, which is probably an exaggeration, but I hate needles, and 1 would have been too many for me, and this is also recalling as my 13-year-old self, so it may not have been quite that many, but
It's a
nonetheless,
lot.
it's a lot. It's
Yeah.
it's terrifying. So I remember her exact words to me, quote, "After 10 days, it will infiltrate your system, and there is nothing more we can do to stop the rabies from taking over. So it's up to you," end quote. Talking about whether I needed to get the rabies shots or not. Talk about some rich doctor-patient communication. So what do you think I did? What any 13-year-old would do, a full-fledged meltdown. I thought the doctor didn't care about me at all. How could she be so callous? How could she not see that needles to me seemed worse than having rabies? In my 13-year-old eyes, and even my 25-year-old eyes, she was and is the most terrifying person to walk this earth. When my normal doctor came back, day 5, halfway to my infiltration point, he reported that there was no known case of rabies from squirrels, and that if it were his daughter, he would not go through the painful shots. So I didn't get the shots. Do no harm, right? We did hold our breath a little on the 10th day, but no foaming in the mouth and no urges to bite anyone, so all clear. I think that was the first time I started considering the effects and significance in my communication with my health care provider. It wasn't until my senior year in college with my non-smoker grandmother who was diagnosed with lung cancer that I really became invested in what was involved in health experiences, especially between doctors and their patients. She lived about 20 minutes from my house, and she coached my basketball team, came to every piano recital and talent show, even to see a choreographed dance to Boyz II Men, Motown Philly, and I frequently stayed the night there in the summers. I was very close with her, and I learned a lot about the patient's experience in a hospital, and specifically in cancer and palliative care through her. But most of all, from her in that season, I learned the strength of humanity in the worst of health and the bonds of community and family. I learned what a lot of health campaigns, the pink ribbon that we saw yesterday is a good example, aim to say. That you need to engage in prevention and don't smoke and you can prevent lung cancer, and the effects those messages have on patients. It's confusing when risky behavior being preached about for prevention is not the cause. My grandmother was never a smoker, and yet she was losing this battle to a disease that was inexplicable for her. But even if she was a smoker, would she have been any less deserving of sympathy and care? No, but what are health campaigns telling us, stories or stats? This experience stimulated my interest in the other half of health stories with healthcare providers. I observed the good physicians, the "oh, he was nice, but what did he say" physicians, the residents, the incredibly generous and kind physicians, the medical jargon, gamma ray metastasized carcinoma physicians, and the ones who brought extra ice cream. I watched the effects they had on my grandparents and my rather large family, and realized that for us, health communication was not an individual communication issue. It mediated our entire family dynamic. What did the doctor say? What kind of surgery? What is stage 4? What will the side effects be? Did you ask him that? What is gamma ray? What exactly did he say? How long? I wondered if the doctors were aware of the backstage scramble we were all doing to understand, and did he care? Everyone has that story of a great physician because of X, Y, and Z, or the terrible physician who would tell a 13-year-old your body might be infiltrated with rabies. But what is it that makes me connect with doctors, and how does it affect my health experience? I was really accident prone when I was younger and spent more time in the ER than both my brothers combined. I would like to think it's living life to the fullest, but my brothers call it clumsy, which is probably more accurate. Anyways, I was in the hospital when I was 9 and needed emergency anesthesia. I was terrified, and my mom finally promised to fulfill my dream of getting a bunny after I woke up to try to help me calm down. And I remember my anesthesiologist trying to talk to me before I went under. The usual count backwards stuff didn't work on me, so he told me about his cat and asked me about mine. Bingo, I love cats. I told him about Pumpkin, of which Pumpkin Fairfield was named after. And I will never forget that anesthesiologist. I felt safe and less afraid because he suddenly became my ally, my favorite fellow cat lover. I brought him a Christmas present that year, complete with cat toys galore, and he connected with the humanity in my health crisis, and I will always remember him. Is that a teachable trait? Did that have anything to do with him being a skillful anesthesiologist? I don't know, but I'd like to think so. So with those experiences, I stand with the memory of my grandmother and standing rabies-free and still a cat lover, self-indulging a bit, and why I will press on towards understanding health experiences, my own and others, through stories of being a patient and stories of communication with doctors. Thank you for listening.
I thought you were going to get bit by a manatee.
No,
I was like, wow.
that would have been less traumatic, I think.
More impressive.
I know.
Yes, that is always the fact that you know, in class, and they say like, oh, Steve, you can tell an interesting fact about yourself. I'm like, oh, my name is Sarah, and I was once bitten by a squirrel.
You know, my mother was bitten by a squirrel when she was a little
Really?
girl in a park. This is the only time that I've ever heard anybody else.
Me too. I've never had any solidarity in that story.
I mean, why does a ranger, like, he's going to find the
Right.
squirrel? I mean, was he going to find the squirrel with blood hanging
You
out?
I
have
know.
five, and you have a lineup, and so you point out
Exactly. Find a line of the
Exactly.
squirrel.
You know, in Comer, my mom was right in the little golf cart next to him, like looking all around. I was like,
No, not the shifty one. I mean, what?
Yeah, that one's a little furrier, I think. That one's a little, like, it was a disaster. And my brothers forever, I mean, to this day, still talk about it. They sent my grandparents a postcard from Homosassa Springs, like, oh yeah, we had a good time. And Sarah got bit by a squirrel. It's hilarious. Ah.
So your family didn't pressure you to do the rabies?
No, well, not that I'm sure they had discussions amongst themselves, but I am like 100% my worst nightmare is
Needles.
getting shots. Like even now I'm such a baby about it. And so I think they knew how freaked out I was. And so they did not discuss it with me. They made it seem like it was my decision. But our family doctor is a very good friend of ours. And so he was like, I wouldn't do it if I were you. So we didn't. But the 10th day was a little hairy. We were kind of like,
Did they, like, tether you to a...
right, like a muzzle on. We were kind of like watching the clock. Like,
We're gonna have to put her down.
Yeah.
You should read, now that you have distance from this, Zora Neale Hurston's story, Their Eyes Were Watching God.
I have.
You have?
Yeah, it's
because
been a long
A
time,
whole
but-
description about rabies in
Yes.
there.
Oh,
Anyhow, okay. So how did you go about crafting this story, Sarah? Because you moved from that one very personal experience through a whole bunch of other stuff.
it's a bit, a few different things. Well, I was thinking of one instance, and it was really hard for me to think about just one situation because I knew for this I wanted to talk about my investment in this topic. And so like why health narratives are important to me, or why my investment in doctor-patient communication specifically. So these 3 points to me were the guiding forces, I guess. And so it's not exactly chronological, but I just felt like those 3 kind of hit 3 different things. Like one, this is like kind of funny, but kind of also terrifying. And then like my grandmother is really what fueled my career path. And then when I started thinking about doctor-patient communication, I felt like that anesthesiologist to me represents something that like I want to explore about what teachable traits are or what doctor-patient communication could be.
Yeah. So I don't think chronological would have
Mm-mm.
brought anything to it. I mean, this was driven by a certain focus you have, and I thought you did a really nice job of moving among those 3 focal points there to make your point. What else did you think about when you were crafting this?
It was, it was much harder than I thought it would be to do. And like looking at what makes a good narrative, I was like, oh my gosh. It's hard to think of all those things and still not let that shape entirely what you're saying. Like I don't want to write it for so I did take into account, like, I wanted it to be conversational and not like, I don't know, kind of like what Ellis was saying in that first paragraph when she said like, this feels better. I'm happy, I'm more contented now. So I felt like I wanted to write it like something I would say, but
Which you did. You pulled that off.
So yeah. It was hard. It was much harder than I thought it would be.
Any other responses to Sarah's
So,
story?
are you saying that there were times, because I know when I was writing, are there times when you're like, oh, that would be a good convention, that would be a good strategy?
Yeah.
But if I have to, that's like a meta-analysis, you know what I mean? It's not my voice. I mean, I would just tell it like this. I wouldn't worry about if I were.
Right.
But I'm doing this as a story, and I have to think about other people, so therefore I gotta sometimes think about those, it would flow better, or it would be. So they're like story conventions versus your sort of authentic self, just blurting it out, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
And then I think that's why Penbaker was saying it's so therapeutic, because
Yeah.
you're forced to make it
Yeah.
coherent and make it,
Make sense.
flow, make sense to someone else other than you.
And that's why like you were saying, it's not necessarily navel gazing, because we can all get something from it. It's not just about Sarah. There aren't just, outside of Pumpkin Fairfield, which
we've
is
got to tell you.
Yeah, I didn't get that alert.
Yeah, we'll tell you.
Yeah, there are very few internal jokes, right? Which are self-indulgent. You've opened it up for the rest of us, to go, oh yeah, my, mother does the same thing. So, I mean, in that sense, I think it's successfully not navel-gazing, right?
I'm very related.
I think the only way it's navel gazing if you just sat there and thought the story in your head and just.
Well, but if you were just talking to yourself,
Don't even have to talk to yourself. Just sit there and just go just think of it. That would be navel gazing to me.
Yeah.
Well, I think you can tell a story and still have it be navel gazing if it doesn't move to our awareness to other issues. If it's just like, this is what happened to me, and it could be an interesting story if it was really interesting what happened to you, but sometimes it's like, why are you choosing to tell me this story about you when it doesn't move to anything
It's like a
else?
bad first date story.
I see that as a response too. I mean, like, it still informs you because that becomes a point of reference. Like, even though you find nothing to identify with it, it's still something you've reflected on to say to such that this has nothing to do with me, you've drawn the line, but because it made you draw the line, it can't be navel gazing anymore.
You're more charitable than I am.
Yeah.
Think about that, like, have you ever been sitting with someone and they just like, it's usually like the first time you meet them and they just want to talk about like, oh, I, blah, 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 blah. And you're just kind of like, you're not interested in me, you're not interested in like anything else but.
I'm more concerned of being that person actually.
Well, but you've talked about, and I think some of them have talked about, stories are co-creations.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It takes at least two people to make a story. It's not just something that comes out of somebody. But there are a lot of times, which stories are selfish and they don't allow you in to co-create and go.
Yes, that you said it well. And then I'm afraid, Daniel, that I do get judgmental sometimes, and maybe that's wrong for me, but I'll make a judgment, that's really self-indulgent because it's just like Jeff was saying, it's a story that doesn't allow me to, or invite me to co-construct with it, or.
That's the point I'm trying to make, is that you can choose to be engaged in the story, to think that, oh, sounds like something I would go through, oh, it's really opening and inviting, let me think about how it applies to me. Or you can choose just to say no and say, look, you know, clearly this has no relevance in my life, even though if you think about it, if you really were to take the time to think about it, I think like, I've never been bitten by a squirrel before, but you know, to me, you know, when I was in the States, every squirrel I saw I was racing after to take a picture. You know, it was fantastic for me. It's like, oh, squirrel, I haven't taken, but I could make that connection. I could go, she's a wimp, you know.
But
you know, I didn't want to take. You should have just taken this shot. I didn't.
That's good.
Just hypothetically, but I could just as easily have been that judgmental. But I think because when you make that call, it ceases to be something. At least that's what I get when I hear the word navel gazing. The implication that it's just within yourself, and there's no interaction whatsoever with someone else, and that's impossible as soon as you articulate a story.
You know, I think I get what you're saying. It's like, it doesn't have to be about me. Otherwise, like, I couldn't read Oprah Winfrey's story about being a black woman in the South. I mean, how the hell am I going to identify with that? But it does let me in the sense of, oh, wow, I could really see that world. You know, I'm there with you. Wow, you know, that is terrible. I can feel that. It doesn't need to be about me to not be self-indulgent. But when I read something that's self-indulgent, it's like, I don't get it. What's the big deal? So what? You know, why, you know, why are you telling me this? I don't,
If Sarah, I appreciate the point you're making that the respondent has choices to make.
But you see, that's huge implications of being a healthcare provider, because you don't get to choose which stories to listen to. If you listen to a story as a doctor and it doesn't make sense to you at all, are you just going to sit down, make a judgment call and say this has nothing to do with me, and then be that clinical, objective person that just prescribes? Or are you going to just try and find the points why, or you know, it's always we always say it's a self-reflexive process.
Well, that's fair, but a patient should be self-indulgent, right? I mean, you're there for the patient. I mean, presumably. So a patient being selfish and telling about themselves is, to me, perfectly legitimate. But when you're writing an autoethnography, that's not quite the same thing, is that?
Well, in the sense when you are telling your medical history, it is technically kind of an autoethnography. And as a doctor who's listening, or any healthcare provider, therapist or psychologist, I think it's not just the patient who gets to be self-indulgent. Whether the doctor or the healthcare provider realizes it or acknowledges it, he or she is still being selfish as well and indulgent by saying, look, either I'm not going to get involved in this story because I need to keep my emotions intact, or, you know, at bay, so that I can work my duty, do my duty and everything, or, you know, I have to kind of realize why I don't see any point of empathy with the doctor or with the patient. So again, to me, that is already a connection, because there's no way. That I just don't see how you do navel gazing. That to me that doesn't make sense.
What if Sarah? I'm just going to be devil's advocate with you now. What if Sarah would have taken the same amount of time with her story, but never made the connection to her grandmother or the anesthesiologist, and took all that time to tell the squirrel story?
Well, people laugh, that's a reaction, that's a connection already. Or, you know, either that, or, you know, we would be sitting in this context and probably you would have asked her, okay, and then you're probably asking her questions, okay, how does this connect to the healthcare setting? Did you go and see a doctor? Maybe you would have asked the question, did you see a doctor after that? Or
I probably would have asked her why she made that choice to dwell on that story. I would have asked her about her choices, yeah.
But that's why it can never just sit alone unless you're talking to an empty room or there's just no one else. But a connection will always be there, even if it just means boring someone's pants off.
So I would buy, I appreciate and I buy your argument. I would also argue with you that I don't know how good a story that would have been in terms of the qualities that we, so yes, it's still a story. Maybe it's not just navel gazing, that's debatable to me,
Right.
but would it have been wouldn't it nearly have been as good a story as what she produced?
And scholars actually have, I mean, this is really a good point, you know, I think that you're making, because scholars have talked about this idea of solipsism. And solipsism is a word that's like you alone in a room. That's what you're talking about to me. Solipsism is you don't need the rest of the world. I mean, for me, that's not the same thing as self-indulgent. Self-indulgent is I'm going to make you sit there and listen to my personal thing. You know, so that doesn't mean that there's not a connection. It's just, it's one that is heavily sort of invested in one person, and you know. But yeah.
I think you make an interesting point there about doctor patients, that like, even when you had mentioned sometimes they write bad historian. So like if, you know, their story is bad, you know, like thinking about the good criteria and bad criteria of narratives, like if, you know, we do think of like this history giving, just in the way that it plays into whether it's a good or bad narrative from the doctor's perspective, I think is it. Like, I wonder, it would be interesting to explore, I think. Like what to the, I mean, you mentioned the chronological order of their story, but like what else is it to them? Is it that they're just not connecting, or is it not, you know, like what is it that makes it a bad story?
For that, you mean in general or with the bad historian kind of thing?
In both.
In general.
Yeah, yeah. We'll tell the class about Pumpkin Fairfield after.
In every way.
Off camera.
What was your first pet's name?
We're doing this now.
No.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh no.
All right. Do it.
I didn't have any pet in my life.
Growing up, we had a dog named Caesar, but he didn't last too long. My mother wasn't very tolerant.
What street did you grow up
Malin Road,
on? Malin?
Malin. I was gonna say, my mother took a vote. It was either her or the dog got to stay.
Oh,
Wow.
all right.
Malin.
Pretty good.
Where were you going with that?
That's just the suspense. That's the part that's the engagement part.
Okay. Rami, did you come equipped with a
Yeah, I want to tell a story of a Superman. We can show a couple of pictures. Do you have internet here?
Yeah.
Can you help me? I put a couple of pictures on my Facebook. So I want to share with you
Superman?
the story of a Superman.
46-year-old young handsome man, right? I keep getting like chocolate.
Whiffs.
Yeah.
Like the nonverbals that go with it.
Keep it down there. You're good.
You need some coffee or something.
I'm not a coffee drinker. Just good, just. What are those wafers? They're like little Debbie. Like they used to give us to us in kindergarten all the time, like pink and green and red and whatever else, and they're like these little wafers and they have cream in the middle. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
What are those called?
sugar wafers. Oh, I don't know about Little Debbie. I
Lady
never
finger.
had.
No, I don't think. I think it. Yeah, just sugar. It just was like. You guys
Okay.
ever
There we go.
This is here.
Wow.
This is in 2011. This is my
hand it
working
right?
desk. in a daily Bengali newspaper. I am in front of my working desk. This is just after the incident I had in 26th of March 2000. That was our national day. I was covering a news in a remote province and I had an accident. And this is another picture of performance. We are doing a recital drama of a famous playwright, story writer, author of Bangladesh. You can see here is me, and you can see my hand. There is a cover on hold my hand, right hand, this one. Okay, so but this was two part of my life that I wanted to share with you. That I was professionally a journalist, but emotionally I was an amateur theatre practitioner. And the day,
I'm sorry, emotionally you were what?
amateur theatre practitioner.
Oh, okay.
So we couldn't say the professional theatre because we don't get paid for it. But we do theatre in Bangladesh. I do. But so this is my theatre group. We are doing a performance, a oral performance of telling a story in Bangladesh. So it was 11th of January 2011. So also, what I want to show that after my illness also, I recovered quickly, but I was active in my professional and life, theatre life. But I am going to read you one of my email to my younger sister, so you can get some connection. Okay?
This was on 1/1/1/1.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I have always nice days.
1/1/1/1.
You can-
January 11th, 2011.
Oh,
No, 2001, January 11, 2001.
Oh, okay, 2001.
So,
yeah, I was like, wait a minute.
But you said
Okay.
2011.
Alright.
and you see there is a bandage, or it's a fiberglass made jacket on my right hand. This is my right hand. So because after my accident, doctor put a nail through the bones, and normally you couldn't keep the plaster, all these things more than 5 or 6 weeks, but it goes more than that, and then I didn't feel comfortable. Then I asked my uncle that what can I do, so he sent me to Calcutta for a treatment. The doctor cut this whole plaster thing and he developed a new jacket like this, so then I can come back and get back to my professional life. But it was not really comfortable because there was a pin outside the nail, so I cannot make my hand straight like this. So it's always hurts. So if I forget about the nail, I mean that end of the nail, so it always hurts.
Still to this day?
No, then I take it out later on. So that's it. Thank you. That is the story of Superman. I wanted to be a writer in my professional life. So my ideal was Ernest Hemingway. Anyway,
So you drank
let's
a
see.
lot.
I wrote an email to my younger sister for the Eid vacation. She sent me wishes of Eid vacation, and you know we had Eid. And during in our Eid day, me and Sarah went out to see a family.
Oh, I heard about that.
Yeah. So they invited us for Heart Health project. I did interview. They invited us on Eid day. So I'm just reading through my email. My sister's name is Roshni, means light. Dear Roshni, thanks for your email. As you wanted to share Eid greetings to me, let me share you what I did yesterday on Eid day. I had to help one of my colleagues to do an interview of a Bengali woman who is a patient who got a heart health problem. The woman and her husband invited us on Eid day, so we had to visit them. I wear my pajama and Punjabi to make the day a bit different. That's a traditional dress we used to wear in Eid day. Maybe you have seen some of them wear it.
Is it like a long tunic?
Yeah, like
Uh-huh.
the top is like long tunic, And pajama is like it's a dress, like it is fit on your lower part of the body. In the morning, I wake up late, so I had a late breakfast, some milk and 2 pieces of wholemeal bread, within bracket. Those are bitter in taste and I don't like them. After getting a report of having bad cholesterol in blood, in bracket, you saw the scar underneath my right eyes. It's a reward of life since 2008. I do not get jam or yolk of egg anymore, bracket close. We start at around 3 p.m. I didn't eat anything during lunchtime as I have to take some rich food like pulao or kheer rice and beef, bracket close, in that family's house. Earlier in the morning, I pressed my pajama and Punjabi, then after that tried to talk to my cousin Shoaib. He's supposed to pick up some of book given by one of my friend Dawood. Why? Bracket, he still remember you. It is his publications, poem book, which came out in last year, bracket close. When I was talking to him, Buri, my youngest sister, tried 3 times to reach my cell phone. I bought an international calling card, bracket, your Bangladesh calling card. What a name, bracket close. And I was using that for talking to him, so couldn't pick Buri's phone as I do not know how to deal with all this new technology. Anyway, then I called back to Buri. Buri handed the phone to Ma, and she was telling about her health as she got cold and cough. She requested me to have some good meal on the occasion of Eid. Bracket, I don't know what does she mean by good food, but maybe she means it could be a traditional food what she used to prepare for us during Eid, bracket close. We were sharing the stories and I was telling to her about my learning how food and its relation to health as a researcher of health communication. And since I left the home in mid of 2002, I do not think all of you had or enjoyed healthy fresh food. I could still remember that I had to be careful what kind of fish I have to buy. That's why you like or not. When I did weekly bazaar, weekly shopping, grocery, sometimes I get fresh fish from Ghat, a port, when I'm coming back from a tour in the city, and then I knew that you will shout at me and housemaid have a pressure or Ma have a pressure to prepare those and put those in the freezer, but I did it because I got those fresh fish and it was a bit cheaper in rates. Now Buri, my younger sister, and Ma always says about all this having fresh food. I can see living with challenging health put people in a different mental stress, especially in Singapore with National University and its care lab. While I have been learning health communication, I can see it clearly. That is why, I decided to be at least active in health-wise and made it sure just after my treatment since 2000 and 2002. That's the connection with the picture I show you. Because I was being treated during this time. That's a long time. I decided not to get any major illness. That's why even I stopped smoking, and I am always careful about getting oily food. When you are sound in health, you will feel a lot of liberty and scope to enjoy life. Have a nice year. Enjoy your life. Your swimming.
So there's one thing that is keeping me in suspense.
How'd you break your arm?
Exactly. You alluded to this accident that caused you to have a big
Yeah.
thing in it. Yeah, how did you do that?
Well, I was a professional journalist, and that was an incident. I was covering a public event. There was an author with his family on a hunger strike on an issue that there was a university was been closed, that we call it Sanidad, for a long time, and they had a session jam. So students were requesting. It was the dirty politics about naming the new dormitories of the universities. So one group of the politician wanting it should be named by the name of some Sufi or Islamic pious people. One group of politician asking that it should be named after the minister mother, and another group of rational thinker who are the teacher, they were thinking that demanding for it should be named after the national martyrs mothers, something like that. Anyway, and there was a deadline. Government couldn't find a way out how to get through this situation. So there was a setup to develop this story. Anyway, I was assigned to cover that event, and there was a group of people, they didn't like it. And some of the religious parties exploiting the mind of people. So on the way back after reporting, some of these excited people got me in red-handed, and they have given me a good therapy. Luckily, I narrowly escaped the death. Normally they cut artery and vein, that's their normal practice. But they thought that I will die within few minutes. I didn't decide to die. But that was my decision during that time. And I had a really well-built friend who was guarding me. So after trying to save me for more than 10 minutes, he left. He escaped because he will be beaten to death. So what they did actually, they use this kind of stick like club, hit on my head, hit on my back, and sharpened blade, homemade sharpened blade, and they did take I think 15 minutes, and they throw me on the street. There were police nearby within 10 years. But police was just watching. Normally police couldn't open fire or go to any action if they don't get any information or signal from the sergeant. So they just thought that I will die within few minutes. They throw me on the street and they ran away. But I stood and I crawled down. I ran next to a auto rickshaw and I requested him to take me to the hospital. But when I reached the hospital, I was really safe. Then my elder brother's friend take care of me. He sent a person from the special branch to take care of me because that province is really different. And at that night, I had been taken back to my capital city. I was treated 6 months. I was the patient of health minister, but this director of the health institute, surgeon, he did some experiment with my hand. I don't know. He, instead of putting some screw and plate on my inside my bones, he tried with some nail. And I'm a working journalist, so it was really struggle until 2002 to to maintain my family, my elder brother joined as a faculty. He's a faculty of communication as well, communication journalism. So our family was not in a really good situation because my elder brother used to earn less than me during that time. He's just a young faculty. Anyway, I decided to get back to a job. Although my office supported me, you don't need to come to job for within 6 months, you can take rest. But I went to Kolkata, India. I didn't have much money to go to bank robbery for the treatment. First, doctor decided I couldn't keep this right hand, but I'm lucky.
They were gonna amputate it?
Yeah. They decided, I don't know, they thought that maybe, but we visited different doctors, especially some nerves were really injured. And there was 2 bones, this narrow bone, there are 2 bones in right hand, narrow bone, some part of the bones were been, I don't know. They smashed this right hand with their shoes, so there was a lot of pieces, doctor couldn't put it together. So some part of this narrow bone is not there, so anyway. And it was really traumatizing experience. Yeah, I could remember that even one of the Eid day, I was in Thailand, AIT, my friend invited me, I had a nice dinner, I was sleeping, but I was having a bad dream and I was shouting, wake up, and I was seeing that some of these extremist people rushing after me, they tried to it was in 2002 when I was living in Thailand. I had a post-traumatic stress disorder symptom. It took me a while. Then I decided not to be, again, I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, I don't get much delicious food even when I feel that okay, it's enough for today. I have been maintaining a kind of food order, but anyway.
So we really heard 2 stories from you, although they're connected. Why did you make the choice? I liked hearing the letter to your sister. The second story, which came out when we asked you a question, which you didn't need to write it down. You had that story obviously with you. Why wasn't that your first choice? Or why didn't you tell us? Because there is a connection between the health reforms you've made and that terrible incident, but you chose not to make that part of your original story. Why did you make that choice?
That I think I could choose that one, but that was much more dynamic, emotional, like a story of a Superman. I don't want to be Superman anymore.
I don't blame you.
Another thing is that story always come along with a lot of emotional reservation. Like I never said that these people who are extremists, I don't think they are Muslim. I came from a Muslim family, but these people are ignorant. They are the scapegoat of political, discourse. But generally, when my friend, some of my family members feel that, oh, these people are really bad, they are Islamists. So this is kind of general notion they have in their mind. And I'm like a superhero. I don't want to be in that controversy anymore. Another thing is that I never tried to, this is a part of life, selfishly. Me and my family were really conscious about, I could get an asylum. We didn't want it to sell this. This is a part of life. It's a part of dignity of the family. So we decided consciously not to tell. We could share, and then the only, I wanted to tell my sister, actually I sent her this mail. The day we went to have lunch with this family, I got this mail from my sister. And Shara was asking me that, what is that? And it's a mail from my sister. So I sent this mail, I mean, it's a part of the mail, but I decided to put this as a part of our learning and my contribution to the health research.
Okay. Well, let's open it up for other people to respond to your stories.
I wonder if part of the, like another category to add, it doesn't necessarily mean all good stories have to have it, but some level of like, almost like this compelling or like shock value of a story that makes it like very impactful. So I guess it would fall under sort of something like impactful. But because your second story, I mean, there are some parts of that story that I don't think we've even heard yet, and we've heard that story before, but we still, like, there were some details that we hadn't heard before. And it's just so, like, even though, like, I can't relate to that on a, like, experiential level, it's still so compelling to hear. And I think that, you know, like, it's not necessarily on, like, I relate to it, but more of, like, wow, this is a very, like, distinct, interesting story.
That's what I had been through this challenging situation. Not only me, my family members, like my elder brother had to take leave from his place. I couldn't even wear my trouser. And I mean, you know, in this situation, people wouldn't like it. So, but that's why I decided, okay, how to lead a healthy life. If I am dependent on my daily life to the family members, it's disrupting their daily life too. So I decided that, okay, I won't get sick. That's what I wanted to tell my sister.
Right. Well, talk about a rupture that led to a transformation. That's the epitome.
But I didn't want to tell this whole story because it's not really important to tell this dynamic story here. My sister knows about my illness. She helped me, treated me. All my family member, friends knows.
But I would have come away with a totally different, not a totally different meaning, but a very different meaning that maybe like Rose, that you know, were worried about your cholesterol and other things, and so you made a reformation in your life, but there was so much more to it than that.
Yeah, and I share one good memory that, like, I love to do shopping, especially we grow up with fish in our culture, so having fish. So I always buy fresh fish, like live fish, and I like to have it. We have different types of fish. So when I buy fish, I mean, you have to prepare the fish and put it in the refrigerator. So I share one good memory of healthy living and healthy food also. So what we had during that time. Now in Bangladesh, they put formalin, a kind of chemical, in every food product to keep it fresh. So it's very difficult to get fresh food, especially fishes like that anymore. It's just 10 years earlier.
Well, one thing before you told the second part of the story was a response that I had was, what a loving relationship between a brother and a sister, that you would take time on a holiday to write such a detailed, long letter to your sister. It gave me some insight into your relationship.
Thank you.
Any other responses for Rumi?
I think I'd like to comment on how this whole traumatic experience actually relates to like identity. You know, how identity has been transformed. Like you say, you become a Superman.
During that time, he really became a Superman and national hero. you know.
Yeah, but then how you want to shed it away, this identity, after that? Like you don't want people to actually relate to you just as a Superman.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
you just want to be normal.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I found it quite interesting, like how there's
Yeah,
this
I mean,
shift.
That's our
Yeah.
family. Like my elder brother is a family chief, and he decided to go to be a faculty. He decided to be faculty of public school, and so we accepted the reality of life that we never wear nice dresses, we won't have cars, we won't have houses, good houses, but we decided that. So that's why I could explore. Sometimes some of other journalist friends inspire me. Hey, why don't you get an asylum? You can go to France, you lead a nice life. But I couldn't even think about that because my elder brother have a really good reputation. He's a well-known teacher to his student. So I don't want to insult him or reputation. I mean, he won't never say that, okay, you can do it, you cannot do it. It's your choice. So that's it.
Yeah, I think certain groups of people will see you as a hero because you overcome that kind of
Right.
difficulty,
Yeah.
but you choose not to use it to
No.
like to play on it. Yeah, so I think that deserves a lot of respect. Yeah.
I appreciate both the stories that you told us today and you're helping. I know you didn't choose to tell the second one
Yeah.
initially, but you, for us, then we become witnesses in some way to the trauma you experienced. Thank you, Rami.
You're
Pauline? Oh, do you want to go
Yeah,
next?
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Because I'm
Good.
approaching it in a different way.
Yeah.
I'm highlighting more of the emotions
Okay,
in my story.
okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, this happened when I was 13. Just sit down.
13 was a rough year all around during that.
Very different numbers. Okay. Numb.
Thank you.
It was all I felt at that point of time. It was a blur for a while. People started surrounding me and asking if I'm okay. Move away, give him some space for him to breathe, the man instructed. I managed to make the situation out. There I was, lying on the grass, with my teacher attending to me. The ambulance will come in a moment. Pain. Screaming as they moved my leg on the stretcher. Great, I thought. This must be very serious. The paramedic then broke the news to me that my femur was fractured. I recalled my failed attempt to clear the hurdle. Anxiety. It was my first time entering the hospital as a patient. The beeping of the machines chanted hauntingly at me while they cut my pants open to attend to the injury. It was all too familiar. Watching too many medical shows and now here I am for real. Oops, here comes the anesthetic gas setting in. Groggy. And there I was lying in bed with a big slab of cement across my whole leg up to my waist. A baby blue cast. I ran my hands across it while I looked around the room. Seeing other patients around me was overwhelming as everyone else has their own stories to tell. But I could only stay in my bed and wonder. Comfort. Having family and friends visiting me, giving me such assurance that things will be fine eventually. You'll be okay, don't worry. You're still young, the bones will heal fast. The metal's inside, right? You'll be okay in no time. So you will feel the pain when it rains? Even sarcasm turned into something comforting. Lonely. I hated the nights. Silence was my only friend. And I hated being immobile. Even the radio couldn't comfort me anymore. It started sinking in that I'm going to be in this bed for a period of time. Helpless. Misery was my only company for the next consecutive days. The same old routine every day. Seeing the nurses attending to me, even for my nature's calls. It was utterly embarrassing that the situation has to come to that. And when all the kids are able to run around, here I was being forced to have things done for me. Depressed. It's been way too long. Being inactive and missing on all the fun things that a typical kid would engage in. Even the laughter from the other patients seemed taunting. I need to get up, but who am I kidding? I couldn't even stand up. All I could do is lie down and having thoughts devouring me. Hopeful. It gave me great comfort after this period of depression when the doctor broke news to me that I was able to be discharged soon. And surprisingly, the food served during my last 3 days in the hospital was exceptionally good. Anticipation was sweet. Relief. Finally, at the comfort of my own home and having things all familiar to me, it was great to hear the voices of my family members. With my crutches to move about, I regained my mobility, although it is still limited. Maybe this is how it feels to be disabled. Humbled. My limitations have taught me that I have taken my mobility for granted. Needing the crutch to move around and people's assistance to aid me in some tasks was indeed an eye-opening experience. Emotional. Finally, it was time to take off that baby blue slab of burden. As the cutter drilled through the cement, I was overwhelmed by mixed feelings. Here I am getting rid of my shackle, but what remains is my story, and my right leg shorter than my left. Thank you.
Is it? Is it right?
Yep, it is.
That was wonderful.
Yes, like when
Thank you.
What did we like about this story?
I think there's a lot of emotions, the progress of like different emotions right from like the beginning of your injury, the loneliness, and then the recovery, kind of like a journey of how you get through the process.
I like the design that you used, like the word and the like. You could easily see, like you're saying, the progression of how you're feeling, and
Yeah.
you know, it's very easy to follow. And it's,
I
you
see
know,
there's, like,
it was
different
beautiful the
scenes.
way. Yeah, I really like
It's a
it.
very distinct style.
That sounds like him.
Yeah, it does.
I would classify that, maybe to use Jeff's term, but it doesn't mean anything bad. It's kind of one of the trashy stories. Not in the sense that it's trashy, but in the sense that it's less cognitive processing. You've laid it out very clearly for us, and we follow along. And something like maybe Rumi's story is takes a lot of processing and takes a lot of your own emotions to try and understand what you go through or what you went through. So I think coming to this, it's like, in a sense, it's a relief, but you're also right to say, we've learned this in the earlier sessions, that it's a lot more difficult to listen to a story that's not as, it jumps here and there, and, it's not laid out as clearly as maybe as Raman's, for example. So I think coming to that, it was like, we didn't have to process, and then it was just, but at the same time, how that kind of, if you think about it, it's laid out so nicely, but I don't know whether you guys also felt that it closed off other interpretations. If you want to think about it that way, because you are quite masterful in storytelling, but in the sense that we only see that one narrative now, that you broke your femur, you got put in a cast, in the hospital. It was very clearly laid out. But for me, I can imagine jumping back and forth in time, all the time, trying to understand what's going on, and how even different events in the present trigger something that happened 10 years ago. Which I don't know. Either story has its merits, but in terms of processing, it's also the effort they have to make.
It's a great
It's
point.
different.
It's like you were leading us somewhere, and we were three feet behind you the whole time, trying to catch up. And he was like, come on.
and this one is straightforward and well written. Every stage you can feel it, like a poem. I just said that. Okay, and then mine was a kind of form of telling a story. It always goes back and forth. That's why I wanted to give a background, that what was my illness. Otherwise, you can feel that I had an illness for a long time, but you couldn't feel the way I feel about my friends, family member feel. Yeah.
Also, in your telling your story, first of all, we had to ask you for what the original problem was, but I think you have purposely, you told us, have put distance
Mhm.
between you and this traumatic event
Right,
and
right.
things that have come afterward. And in your style, you took us right into the immediacy of the experience as it happened. So for different reasons, two very different ways of telling the story and of crafting the chronology so that, yeah, it took us to different places.
Purposely, I didn't wanted to share the traumatic experience. Especially, I mean, everyone, family members, I'm sending a mail to my sister, she knows what had been through we are.
Right, you didn't
So,
have to articulate that
articulate it.
again.
So, but
It's
what
not
I'm
just
saying,
the topic, though.
yeah,
It's
so
the
what
way
We have a comment back here.
I just felt like the way both of you told your story was different, and it made me feel like that's how you went about healing. Like for you, you healed by like thinking, oh, I feel like this, I feel like this, and for you it was like more complex, and you were also, I think, I could also almost imagine that when it happened to you, you were probably like, oh, I don't want to think about it, and so you think about everything else, and then you slowly think about what happened to you. I felt like that,
I do disagree with you. Oh, I'm disagreeing with
It's
you
okay.
today, Daniel,
It's alright.
because, a totally different thing that I had told you about my kidney stone episode before. And I didn't feel that was closed. I could really identify with what it's like when you have something traumatic happen to you, where you have to have more dependency on somebody else, and then you slowly come back to it. So even though it was kind of encapsulated and it was his story, it was one that at least I could identify with, and all those different emotional states from being acutely ill to feeling better, I could recognize that in my own experience. So for me, it wasn't totally,
Maybe just
encapsulated.
compared to Rumi's.
Yeah,
you left
oh,
it
two
more
very
open.
different,
Yeah, and
yeah.
relative to
Yeah.
Rumi's.
yeah.
I mean, in a sense, like, and also, like, I mean, you were saying at some points there's comfort, but I think overall the thing I take away is that it was a very traumatic experience. But another way of maybe interpreting maybe what is left out is like, could you have been happy about it?
I mean, I guess, yeah.
You
people
seem
have-
happy about it
yeah.
now. I mean, like, it's something to tell people and be proud
As
of,
in-
but
It was a very traumatic episode, definitely.
yeah.
But I mean, through that course of time, you begin to appreciate things which you overlooked. I mean, like like mobility, like what I said,
Yeah.
and the fact that all the while you've been taking things for granted, like people aiding you around. Like you will always depend on people and all that. So now you're extra dependent on people. You'll be like, whoa, okay. You take a step and like, wow, you tend to appreciate all this stuff. So to me, it was a learning experience.
So that was when you were 13. Do you think that's still an insight for you?
Definitely.
Have you carried that with you?
Yes, of course.
I'm going to agree with Daniel in the sense that, when Raman tells his story, it's like he's telling a story in a very bright room. I mean, there's no cognitive effort to go, oh, I get it. I mean, Rumi's story, I felt like he was taking us around corners into dark rooms with like a,
Yeah.
like a lighter.
That's a great man.
And we were going, I think we were saying, what does this have to do with this? Or what's going to happen next? How does this connect? And there was a lot of, it was like this. Can you see past right? He's given us just a small glimpse. Whereas this one was like in a very bright room, and you can see, like, with all those details. The food was good, and this was that, and I could hear the kids laughing. It's like, oh, I get it, Great.
Even the metaphor you used about being a Superman, I mean,
That's what I said.
it's very, if you think about it, it's very deep. It's not just about being someone who's indestructible, it's someone who's defined by being different from someone else.
Right.
You know the story of Superman, he's an alien, literally, so it's like you're separate and that makes you special, but at the same time you don't want to be special.
Right.
I can hear that
That was
from you
really
also.
a different part of life. I can remember that just after the accident, I lost my job, and I had to find a job because I had a family to run. And then I made sure that I will join the job. Then I arranged the cost of the treatment. Then I went abroad for my treatment. and I get back. And with this and Band-Aids, I was still struggling. I'm doing the performance and I joined the new job in another newspaper. So I mean, whole the family, and when someone is sick, you couldn't even imagine. Although I'm earning member, I get back to job. Whole the family had been through a traumatic time for at least 2 years. It's not really easy for a family. And if you are an earning member of the family, major earning member of them, that's different, really different. But I wanted to share to my sister, see, I'm really good, I'm trying to maintain a good health, we had some good memory. That's what, see, I have to be careful about my health. I wanted to share the positive part of the story. During that time, I always thought that, okay, that's the end of my life, end of my career. I couldn't be amateur theater professional anymore. I wanted to be an actor. I couldn't go back to my job as well because I'm already branded. So I decided carefully, what should I do? Then I turned my job into a researcher position. I never wanted to be a journalist, like a well-known journalist after this. So this whole thing, any kind of illness, change the pattern and course of life, and it affects the family. That's my realization.
Thank you to both of you. Two great stories. Who would like to go next? Pauline, come on.
Okay. I'm sorry I didn't prepare a lot. I just like, because yesterday I tried to write down what health means to me, and then I was thinking which story I should tell, because I think my life is like quite healthy most of the time, but all things about health to me is related to family.
To
The
family.
family. Yes, because maybe I start my story in the same year as September 11. It's the same year. It's my first time went to USA, and I went to a special need camp in New York State. It's the north part of New York State, and it's a special need camp. So it's exactly the same as what we see in Murder Ball and also in Lorenzo's Oil. All the patients are like that. They are all in wheelchair. They are so. I remember the first patient I served is a woman who is like around 50 to 60. Is a woman in a bigger size than me, and she is nonverbal, immobile, and I need to use the kind of machines to lift her up to the toilets to watch her. And I remember the first day, because I was late to admit into the summer camp as a counselor, I haven't had the training on the first day. And then I serve, I wake up in 7 in the morning, go to the room and try to dress her up, need to brush teeth, wash her face, dress her up. But I really don't know how to do it because I didn't go for the training. And she is definitely heavier than me. So in the camp, it's like a very big struggle. It's my first time to serve another person's in all aspects. Going to the pool, going whatever. And I remember the first week I cried a lot because this summer camp is not really the things I need to do, but I just adventurous, as we talked about this morning. I just adventurous. I want to experience something. And then the first week I just like think myself, why I should do that? I don't need to do that. At that time I already have a good job. And then I take a 3-month leave to go to the summer camps to serve those people who can't communicate with me. What's the point? But I remember one incident, I cry a lot. I just go into the jungle because it's the summer camp. I go into the jungle and then cry. My camp director was seeing me crying all the way to the jungle, and then she don't know what happened. And then I just cried for an hour for the experience I had. But after a while, I find that it's very interesting to communicate with those people. It's my first time find that how a person who can live her life non-verbally for 60 years. And then they still can smile on their face. When I sing to her, she still can kind of like, of course it's not very interactions, but you can see they enjoy the moment. And I was thinking, if I'm in her age, and if I cannot speak, what will happen to me? At that time, I think I really appreciate and I try to work with them. And it's the 10-week camp. So after a few weeks, I get integrated quite well with my guests. We don't call them patients, we call them guests. So we interact with our guests, and then we have good time. Some of them even they like my tricks, like because I like to do handicraft, and then I do a lot of different things for them, and it's a lot of fun. And at the 8th week, I even try to get into the art and craft rooms to prepare some program for them, which I'm not a special need trained, but I still get quite an art exhibition for those guests. So it's a very great experience. But at that time, I really don't know what is the value of these camps to me. I just know that I have an experience. But after 10, it's why I link it up with September 11 is because I think it's life-changing for American that year, but it's also life-changing for me because I find it's like I feel life is so different from my previous like healthy, normal life in Hong Kong. And almost like 10 years later, 2 years ago I think, I forgot which year. One day my mother gave birth to me like, it's like middle age, like 40 something. So I have a big age difference with my mother. And you can imagine with such difference, my mother is getting old. One day she suddenly told me that she cannot walk with no reason. Just like cannot walk even a short distance from in the bedroom, go to the bathroom. Then I try to help her because I know her very well. I'm very close to my mother, and she don't want to go to hospital. I have including me is 7 siblings. It's a big family, but I'm the youngest. I'm the youngest, so I'm the closest to my mother. So all my mother's health issues come to me. I talk to my mother, and then she said that don't tell the other siblings. She just wants to share with me. And I said, okay, I help you. So because I was teaching in school, I have flexible time. So most of the time it's like, I stay at home, I bring her to the bathroom. I was using the skill I learned from the camp. Exactly. And then my mother was like, she trusts me so much because I really can use a very good ways to carry her. My mother is also heavier than me. And I carry her, and she is like, when she leans her whole body to me, I carry her all the way. And I found that it's like the connection is so close to each other. And actually my eldest sister is a nurse, was a nurse, she's not now. But she was trained it, and she always say that, oh, how you treat your mother, and I said, no, I know how to do it because I exactly have a 10 weeks training, intensive training on that. So I do it all the way and help my mother, and she finally recover from the unknown things. And the story go on as my parents getting older and older. 2 years ago, I planned to go to US to have a study. A week before my trip, I got a phone call from a policeman and tell me that, is this your father? I said, yes. He has an accident in the zebra crossing. think, when was that? No. Actually, I was thinking it's a police record of like some day ago, like just inform you there's an accident or like illegal crossing the zebra crossing. And then I said, you would better be come to the hospital as soon as you can. I said, what's the status? Because I really have no idea. It's like I just woke up and then it's very early in the morning. My father usually go for jogging in the morning. So I immediately I need to call my siblings. I call my sister. She has a car. So and she was the nurse. So we went to the hospital. So luckily my father is okay. But you know, at an old age, you have accidents. It's kind of like you'll be worried. And then it's like 1 week to my trip. I already booked all the things. And the operation is like 3 days after the accidents because they need to wait. Then I was thinking, should I cancel the ticket? Should I go? Because it's really a struggle for me. But of course, it's lucky that I have a big family. My siblings are very supportive. So after the operation, what I do is like I go every day to my father's ward, and he was in intensive care. So I do massage to him, and then it recall my memory in the special need camps again. But I know that my father liked the massage because it really is like when you are after the operation, you are so immobile, and then you need to do a lot of massage to keep the circulation well. So what I can do is just spend 4 days there. Every time, if I can, I just go to the hospitals to do all the things, and then my sister said, "Oh, you should go to your trip." So I went my trip. So in this 2 months time, I went for study for 2 months. In these 2 months, what I can do is just like distant call and to check the status of my father. This kind of things doesn't end. A year later, just like right after I took the GRE exam, which I prepare for go to PhD study, I have a trip with my brother and my sister-in-law to Korea, and we went to the Korea to have a trip. On the way, on the day I come back to Hong Kong, I call at home, because usually it's a practice. We call home to check which I have two apartments in Hong Kong. So I need to check where my mother is so I can get into the house. But there's no one in the at home. It's very strange because it's the time suppose someone is there. So I call my sister. Where's my mom? And she say, Mom is in the hospital. Because on the day I leave Hong Kong, my mother was stay alone at home, and she was trapped in the bathroom, and the door was locked, and the femur was broken, and she stayed like 3 hours in the bathroom alone. And was lucky that because my mother don't know many things, and she can't remember any of our phone number. But on that day was like I didn't do it on purpose. I just put the telephone outside the bathroom. Usually it's on the other side. But I just on that day I put on the bathroom. My mother just pressed the readout button and called my sister. And my sister called the firemen and need to break the door and get into my house to get my mother out. So it's already after 1 week of her accident. But of course it's luckily she's okay after operation. But actually it's 2 months before I come to NUS. So all this instance, I withdraw that is related to my experience in the US camp. Helped me a lot to see that, but it's also a struggle for myself. What I see is actually for what I see yesterday on how I found Elvis It's like, of course, the basic thing, I think health is related to diet, what you eat, exercise, and stress. For me, like how to stay healthy is related to this. But now, as I say, family is very important because I found the support is very important. And as I see the time progress, I think aging is start to be the things I need to really think of. Because I would think, when I'm getting old, can I take care of mother as I watch the movie Amor? What I associate with Amor is the time of my parents and me. It's not the couple, but it's how they connect with each other. So I think aging is like very important issue. So I think caretaker is important. Who will be the caretaker in the family? I don't mind to be, but I might not able to always be. Like now, I cannot be. So I need to depend on my siblings to do all the work. And I know my mother very well. She's the kind of person like, she don't want to go to the hospital anytime, any point of time. Who will be the caretaker? And also, of course, getting older, money is also an issue. You need to concern where the money come from. And Hong Kong is so different. We don't have kind of MediSave. We don't have that kind of medical insurance things. So I think I should prepare for that, for my future, for my parents, for everything. Yeah, this is my story.
Wow. Responses for Pauline?
Actually, before I respond to Pauline's story, I was wondering if I could share mine because it really is about pretty much the same thing.
Okay, good.
Trying to, well, I don't know how much about taking care of parents, but I too am the youngest in my family, even though it's not just me and my sister. So I think it's a different story, but it's the same on many levels as well. So I'm going to preface this by saying when writing this, I was confronted with how poor my memory is. So I think it will come out in this, but anyway, I remember August 8th, 2011 in bits and pieces. I was midway packing for my semester-long stint at Purdue graduate school, agonizing over what to take and what to leave behind on my 5-month trip. I think it was sometime in the late afternoon when I heard Mom call out to me from her bedroom next door. Although when I revisit that moment in my head, it's also been way past nightfall. I don't remember exactly what she said. Obviously, she called my name. She calls me Dad. I think she moaned something along the lines of not being able to bear the pain and to call Dad. But I can clearly picture how she looked. She was lying in bed in her nightie, clutching at her head. Her eyes were clenched shut, the rest of her face screwed up in a mask of pain, framed by tendrils of hair soaked in sweat. Now, I have to explain that up to that point, Mom was never sick. Sure, she had the occasional colds, flus, headaches, but she was a career woman through and through. Every Monday to Friday, she'd get up in the morning, and Dad would drive her to work at the hospital. And she'd be home at 6 p.m., maybe 7 if the traffic was bad. If she could carry on working by popping a Tylenol or two, she would. But for the last couple of days, Mom was home, nursing a headache that never seemed to quit. I could tell she had tried not to make a big deal of it, especially since I was due to fly off on August 9th. But at that moment, I remember how frightened I was that these headaches were beyond the help of Tylenol. I rang Dad, and I remember being relieved that he was just downstairs in the parking lot, probably washing his car or something. He was soon back in our apartment. Or maybe he wasn't answering his cell phone and then I panicked. I called a family friend who was a doctor. Or maybe it was my sister or her husband, I don't know. I only remember making a frantic phone call. Eventually Dad appeared, and a lot of what happened between my home and the hospital passed, as cliche as it sounds, in a blur. There were some moments of clarity. I remember cradling Mom's head in my lap. I remember holding on to a plastic bag for her to retch into. I think Dad was talking to that family friend / doctor over the Bluetooth speakers. Yeah, I remember hearing the measured tones of a voice attempting to keep someone calm. They were deciding between two hospitals, a government hospital about 15 minutes away and a private hospital more than 30 minutes away. We had bad experiences at the ER of the government hospital a few years back when my late grandmother was suffering from heart attacks every couple of weeks. I think that's why we ended up going to the private hospital even though it was further. Plus our family friend worked there as well and said he'd meet us there. I think it must have been a public holiday, so that's why he wasn't at work. The next thing I remember was waiting in the lobby just outside the wards. Mom had already been admitted at the time. I had to make a big decision. Do I cancel my flight? And if Mom doesn't get better, how do I launch myself halfway around the world? I called Prof. Mohan first, probably only the second time we've ever spoken. I hadn't even met him yet. I delivered my news, and I think I suggested that I might not even turn up at Purdue. I called the airlines next. Fortunately, I had bought one of those flexible date tickets, so I just booked myself on the flight the following week. I think I told my sister next first about postponing my travel. I know she probably wanted to chide me, but I think I got angry first. I might have imagined it, but I think I shot this question at her just as if she was about to scold me. Would you leave it? Would you leave her if it were you? I like to think she shut up, but knowing her, she probably didn't. I don't even want to bother recalling her response. There was a nice doctor attending to Mom. I only remember a white lab coat and black rimmed glasses. Was the doctor a man or a woman? I honestly have no idea. I think he or she talked about running PETs and MRIs in hushed tones because Mom was finally asleep because of the sedatives. I distinctly remember feeling a little smug because thanks to 4 years of biology classes, I could follow all the jargon the doctor was using conversationally, even though he or she wasn't attempting any way to explain them. I think I must have gone home for the night. I think my sister had driven me home under the pretext of getting rest, but really she wanted me to pack for Purdue, and I didn't. I was back at the hospital the next morning with some of Mom's overnight things, some clothes, her hairbrush, a face cream that she's been using since I was a kid, and other things that I can't remember, although they were probably more thoughtful items than useful ones. During the day, Mom was either asleep or was in another part of the hospital for testing. She awoke later that evening and we ended up watching the National Day Parade on TV as she tried to eat some dinner, but not altogether succeeding in keeping it down. I remember thinking that I'd never missed a National Day before, and I thought that would be the first year that I wouldn't be in the country for it. And because of this, my record just goes unbroken. I think at some point I had to tell Mom I wasn't flying to the US as planned. I probably felt like I was such a good son, selflessly putting aside my plans for my mother's health. I'm pretty sure Mom blamed herself. There was a look she gave me that I have in my mind. It's hard to describe, like a mixture of frustration and regret, maybe even with a tad of confusion. I imagine she was torn between feeling grateful and I was there to be with her, and angry that she was making me waste such a good opportunity. The next day, August 10th, around lunchtime, my sister showed up with an ally, another doctor, a general practitioner, although she now spends her days zapping acne scars and injecting Botox. She certainly looks far too youthful for her age. The two of them thought they could convince me to go for my overseas studies. Naturally, I had my guard up. Nothing conclusive had come up from the test so far, so how could I go? Don't waste this chance, they said. No, I argued. Mom needs me here. There will be other opportunities. Be a good son and go, they said. No, I'm being good because I want to be here to help. You'll be wasting money, they said. I think I just rolled my eyes. And then the low blow. You're no use here, and they wouldn't stop after that. You cause more problems by staying. She won't get well because she'll always be worrying. You'll make her worse by staying. So now I'm someone who doesn't cry easily. The last time I really well and truly cried was a couple of years earlier at my grandmother's cremation. But at that point in time, I felt my eyes welling up. I think I shouted, "Fine, I'll go," and stalked up before the two women could see the tears fall. I just wanted to get away from them and from everything. I think I stumbled further into the maze of wards. Somehow I found an elevator by sheer coincidence and it was already at the floor so I could make a quick getaway, or this could all be in my head. It wasn't a visitor elevator, it was one of those large ones for the gurneys with the padding along the walls. I took it down to the basement and I like to think it was the same level as one of the morgues. I stumbled out and collapsed into the nearest chair and I cried for what felt like hours but was very likely much lesser. In the midst of that, I think a nurse passing by had asked if I was alright and I managed to sob a yes. And I think it really happened and I wasn't imagining it because a box of Kleenex materialized next to me at some point. So eventually I cried all the tears out of me. I remember my head was throbbing from the force of my tears and my mind was a messy ball of rage. All I could hear were the voices egging me on to go, telling me I was a problem just by staying. So I don't want to get too much into it, the story already. The short of it was that I changed my flight to one that was leaving that very night. I drove home and packed, and when I mean I packed, I just threw everything in my suitcase and didn't really check. And my dad, even though he was surprised, he took it really well. He sent me to the airport that night. A couple of close friends showed up. They were of course really surprised that I was leaving so suddenly, but so I left for the US that very night. And I very much wanted to stay, but that flight was fueled by rage and guilt. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's it.
But very thoughtful and composed.
What happened to that rage and guilt over time?
My family, we don't talk. We really don't talk.
Did your mom recover?
When I was at Purdue, she actually discharged. She got discharged a week later. And then she went back in after a month. She came out again and she went back in after another month. And sometime in November, they found, I think from my dad, she told me her eye was suddenly swelling, like there was pressure in her brain. So she had to go for brain surgery, but luckily they could do it like keyhole, so it wasn't like they had to open her head up or anything. But that was in November. And miraculously, apparently that was the thing that was bothering her. And by the time I got home for Christmas, she was home. And then by January, she was going back to work. So she's pretty much still been going to work for the last 2 years. Monday to Friday. But
So two different stories about family caregiving. Yours was a little more of a chaos story, Daniel. And Pauline's actually had some of the earmarks of that because it was, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. But you kind of then step back from it and first of all, you turn the chronology from the past to saying what's going to happen in the future. And you also made a model out of it. I do have a question for both of you. Was it difficult digging back into these memories to craft these stories?
Yes and no.
good answer.
What does that mean, Pauline?
Yeah, because like for me, I have away from home for almost a year. Like after the 2 months, I at one point of time, I think it's about 4 months, I suddenly have a kind of nightmare about my mother. Like it's just a nightmare, but I can't contact my sisters because she's in business trip. Usually it's like the sister just older than me, like it's the contact point for me. Of course I can contact others, but it's like it's more often I contact the sister who
because she's just older than me, and she was in business trip, and then I cannot contact her like for 2 weeks, and I don't know what happened. I do, because of the incident of the Korea trip, because they don't tell us anything about the accident. I really worry that they might hide something from me. And I asked my nephew online, my another sister, maybe they are both like too busy, and then I don't know what happened, and then there's just no reply. I was so worried at that moment. And then I just like sent every day, please reply, until they reply. And then until I see my mother, I saw my mother on Skype. I know she's well. It's like that kind of like worry is like with me all the time.
I bet you had some of that too, Daniel, leaving the way you did.
Well, I tried to do what Alice did with, she mentioned something about the method acting and trying to recall the details so you can immerse yourself back in that memory. But the thing, it was so frustrating because really, as you can tell, I really couldn't rely on my memory to remember all the details. Or even if I did, I was like, did I fill in the gaps by myself, or was it something that really happened? So I didn't really trust it. But I think...
But she also talks about narrative truth versus historical truth.
That's true. I found myself actually going more like what Raman felt, like it was just a series of emotions, and that became kind of like the starting point. Like at this point it was fear, at this point it was indecision, next point it was anger, next point it was just complete outright rage and guilt, and but it wasn't as clearly like one after the other. It was just like a big ball of mess.
That's the chaos part.
For the last 3 or 4 days, yeah. For those 3 or 4 days at least. Then and just.
So how does it feel to have gotten that out?
It's nice. I've actually really never talked about this part before because I don't know, it's something, again, it's my family, we just don't talk about things. Every time at dinner, weekends, my sister will come home because she's married and she lives somewhere else. She'll come home if and then she wants to come back. We'll have dinner and everyone will be glued to the TV. So that's my family. We just don't talk about things. So this was something that we just, I guess, never resolved. And I guess that's why it's written that way. I like to hope. I hope there will be a resolution somewhere, but especially when reaching the end, it's like, where do I stop? Where do I stop? Where do I stop? Clearly I added on. Like I had to fill in the blanks. Like, oh yeah, there were more times she went in and out. There were more times surgery. When she was about to go into surgery, I had to, like Pauline, I had to fight the details out of my dad over Skype and stuff like that. But it wasn't. It's like it doesn't end. You just have to pick a point where it just stops and not, we're not monopolizing the time. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's life, and when we tell stories, we frame it, we put the boundaries in. And also recall that Pennebaker says that when people write down these, traumatic or not so great stories, that it awakens a lot of tumultuousness, and over time what they found was it felt better, but not immediately after, but not that long. So, I know you have to go.
But I really enjoyed.
You want to take a piece of pizza before you go? You want a piece of pizza
I'm
before
just
you
going
go?
straight to class.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
John has a story.
Yeah.
No, I just
Calling
want
in for the
to
pizza.
just share that
Sorry.
I find both the stories to be very moving. Yeah, like
Can people eat as they're listening? Because the pizza's hot, you might as
Yeah.
well.
So both our stories were actually very moving because they really touch on a lot of emotions, and I find that for Pauline, the story is more, he found some resolution, whereas for him, he didn't resolve it. So that's the difference in that. You can learn different lessons from
Can you
that.
speak just a little bit louder?
Yeah, I think you can learn different lessons from both the stories. Like one of them is resolved. Like she actually produced a diagram for Pauline. And then the other one is actually still in process
Yes.
of being resolved. So I find, yeah, it's very emotional in the stories they share. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe I share mine.
Please.
Yeah, okay. So my name is Joan. I'm actually from the Department of Social Work. So I'm a second year PhD student. And I'm actually doing a study on how cancer survivors, they make meaning of their cancer experience. So it's basically how they make sense using the adjustment to cancer. And what I'm sharing is actually a poem I wrote that is based on my experience. And I used to work with children with cancer, as a social worker. But before that, before I became a social worker, I was actually a volunteer for many years, also with children with cancer. Yeah. So this poem was more like in my role as a volunteer. I encountered this child. It's actually changed my views of how children experience trauma. Yeah. So I just shared the poem. It's called Red Trees Dancing. So trees dancing with fire, you painted your grief red. Then slowly you douse it with rain, as if tears could wash away the strain. Just a little boy, fresh with the crisp of youth, your papered self was crumpled. With the encounter of death's hand, your sibling was taken away to another land. So with a fragile rage you painted, trees dancing with smokes on their backs, agony writhing from a hurt so vast, the happy glowing of childhood, twisted in a glowing realization of an iron pain that fire had cast. The trees melted in the rain. I hugged you and hoped that love could make that redness fade. Yeah. So it's just a poem. So to elaborate more on the poem, it's basically my encounter with this child who is about 10 or 11 years old. And that really stirred in me a lot of emotions because the parents were actually away in a counseling session. And as a volunteer then, because I was still very young, so I was basically just, my role is to do art and craft with the children and to occupy the time. So while the parents is away in counseling. So for this child, he's actually lost a sibling to cancer very recently. So just 1 or 2 weeks before. Yeah. And basically on the surface, he's very active and he jokes around, he plays around, and the parents also did question, is that child actually experiencing grief? Because the child, actually even during the funeral was playing and acting out games, so the parents also was very confused, whether should they be worried about the child. Yeah, and I think that's why they spoke to the social worker in a counseling session. But in my experience working with this child, more as a volunteer, when he was drawing this picture and he drew it with such intensity, it actually moved me a lot because it shows me like there's his grief. You know, I asked him about it, but even though he didn't directly relate it to the siblings passing away, but I could see there's some, you know, like resonance in that. You know, there's some anger in that. Because like in other occasions, he did share with me, you know, because I have been volunteer for quite some time, so he does come to my sessions like for a few times. So he did also share with me, like in other moments, like when the sibling was still very sick, he gets really ignored a lot, you know, because his family is so focused on, you know, the sick sibling, you know, that he feels like, hey, daddy and mommy don't pay attention to me. And then he feels very sad about that. You know, at the same time he feels like angry with his brother in a way. But in a way also like there's mixed feelings. Because he feels angry to his brother for why, you know, I should also get cancer, you know, so that my parents will pay attention to me. On the other hand, also there were moments where he shared with me, you know, his sadness. You know, that he feels worried that the sibling will go off anytime. So there's this whole bag of emotions, and I could see like when he was drawing, it just came out. And it just like gave me this realization on how children experience grief. It's quite different from how adults experience grief. So even though like the parents were saying during their funeral he was still playing around, but he probably is trying to process things within himself through the play. Yeah, through, you know, like running around. And through the drawing also is trying to express something that maybe he couldn't say. So this poem is to share this like realization I have about children's grief. And in a way like my experience working as a volunteer, serving the kids, actually motivated me to, you know, think that I have to study further, you know, to develop myself further. So I have actually better skills and more knowledge to work with the kids. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, coming then to my experience as a social worker, I think it helps really like, you know, the whole body of knowledge that I learned in social work in relating to the kids. Yeah, and I see that how, you know, probably it would help if then the social worker could also involve the child in a counseling session and not just put him away, I mean, with to do the art and craft. Maybe do something together as a family, like art and craft together with the child to express the grief. Yeah, so this is just some of my thoughts.
Could you read the poem one more time?
Sorry?
Read the poem one more time.
Okay. Okay, it's called With Trees Dancing. Trees dancing with fire, you painted your grief red. Then slowly you douse it with rain, as if tears could wash away the strain. Just a little boy, fresh with the quips of youth, your papered self was crumbled with the encounter of death's hand. Your sibling was taken away to another land. So with a fragile rage you painted, trees dancing with smokes on their backs. Agony writhing from a hurt so vast, the happy growing of childhood, twisted in glowing realization of an iron pain that fire had cast. The trees melted in the rain. I hugged you and hoped that love could make that faintness faint.
It speaks for itself, really. I'm really glad someone tried to form like poetry as a way of expression and communication. I wish you had been with us throughout these couple weeks, because we had other times where we talked about childhood cancer. I wish you would have been part of that discussion, but thank
It's
you.
busy.
Yeah, no, I
I really appreciate
understand.
my
I understand.
company.
Yeah. Anybody want to have other responses, want to say? I think everybody really appreciates that.